Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's Cabinet meeting. Just to go through housekeeping to start with, the fire evacuation procedures for this evening's meeting. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening, so if the fire alarm sounds, please can we evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the side of the room through reception, and we meet in the War Memorial Park. Please don't disappear. We want to count everybody out and make sure we are all accounted for. In terms of the webcast of the meeting, it's live on the internet and it will be available on YouTube after the meeting to review. And in terms of microphones, can I remind everybody, members and officers, that in order to be heard clearly within the room by those present, can you speak directly into the microphone and don't move it, it's set up for the cameras. In terms of mobile phones, could you please switch them all off or turn them to silent, please? Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. I don't have any apologies this evening. Declarations of interest. Are there any on the agenda items this evening, colleagues? No.
We are talking about Newman Court, obviously be a county council decision.
Yeah.
I am a county councillor, although I'm not part of the administration.
Thank you, Gavin. That's a problem. Urgent matters this evening. There are no urgent matters on the agenda this evening, so I move to item 4, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of March. Colleagues, do I have your permission to sign them as a true and accurate record of that meeting? I will do so. There are no items for item 5, leader and portfolio holder announcements. So the main substantive piece of our business this evening before reports is item 6, which is the motions referred from council, starting with support for Basingstoke and Dean residents under threat of criminalisation following abortion or pregnancy loss. And the mover of the motion from full council, Councillor Hart, wishes to address the committee this evening. So Stacey, if you come forward to the speaking slot, and you have 4 minutes to address the meeting when you're ready. Evening, Stacey.
Good evening. Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Cabinet members, for having me. I'm here with some ideas, basically, and suggestions for this work. I've given you all handouts, so you don't have to scribble down all my thoughts. If you didn't get them, please shout and I'll give you a copy. The first item in the motion asks to write to Luke Murphy and the relevant secretaries is the easiest. The contents of the letter is going to depend somewhat on the timings and results of some amendment votes on the crime and policing bill, but I've made some suggestions and I'm happy to help with that if that's appropriate as we and the bill move forward. The point 2 of the motions asks is where most of these suggestions are going to come in. Some are simple, so I'm not going to read the document verbatim, but some I will explain a little, and I'm also happy to answer any questions now or later. Please note, I'm not a subject matter expert, so these are a starting point that I hope will be fleshed out by meeting with people that are. Obviously, starting with meeting with the service provider BPAS to understand any challenges, barriers to timely abortion care, support and things, checking on activity that may require triggering buffer zone laws, which we now have. That wasn't an issue last time I checked with them, but it may be in the growing climate. Similar meetings with Stop Domestic Abuse, other relevant partner agencies, those are fairly obvious things. I think it's important to meet with the ICB as well to get their input on similar challenges, barriers, support. Also, things like processes around conscientious objection. 10% of GPs, I learned when I was researching this, are reportedly not pro-choice and are supposed to refer immediately to another HCP, but they are not legally obliged to do so. So if part of the issue with this is barriers to timely abortion, it makes sense to find out how clear and robust ICB processes are on this locally. Processes around reporting from medical staff. You'll remember from when I presented this that rates of investigation and prosecution are rising. Many of these cases do come from medical staff reporting, so I think it would be a good idea to sort of learn what guidance is given on this for staff and how it marries up with confidentiality and patient care. And I think it would also be a good idea to meet with PCC Donna Jones to understand how local police are being directed and guided on this. The NPCC released new guidelines this year on how to search the homes and digital devices of women suffering miscarriage or stillbirth, and on how to bypass the need for a court order for medical records. They did that quite quietly. In one case last summer, Hampshire police attempted to access local BPAS records of every single person who had recently tried and failed to access abortion care. I think those are things that we should be having discussions with her about to see where they're at with it, and prioritising of health of women involved by police. Again, you may have heard stories or read things about women being barred from contact with their children, including breastfeeding children, being held in custody following painful loss and surgery, or not having access to appropriate mental health support, and so on. I am aware on this particular point that we do not have jurisdiction over policing, but I think it's reasonable as a working partner of the local constabulary to ask these questions and to find out more about their specific approach to this. Priorities in policing, like any institution, shift based on the cultural direction from the people at the top. And if we want to learn how best to support residents, I think it behoves us to understand on what that direction is. And finally, there are simple things like signposting, which is a fairly easy thing to achieve, I think. But also appointment, I think, would be a good idea of a single designated contact within the council for anyone on this. To be clear, I do not mean a legal or medical expert or anything that implies liability for us, but people in this situation are likely to be extremely vulnerable in very complex situations with multiple strands, and may potentially be unable to self-navigate the warren that is overlapping authorities and departments and services. Yeah, that's all of the sort of the more complex items, I suppose. Everything else should be fairly self-explanatory on the document I've given you. I think in light of LGR, I think this should be a live piece of work rather than a one and done. And points 3 and 4 on the motion will flow from some of the decisions you make on this, so I won't say anything about those now, but I'll just end by saying that there are a couple of other members and I, one of whom at least has some expertise in this area, who are happy to support in this work, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Stacey. It's appreciated. Colleagues, would you like to share any points? Having heard Stacey's contribution, would you like to make any contributions yourselves?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I mean, I'm, very happy to request we write to Luke Murphy, the MP, and I think you've done a great body of work. But I said before, and I'll say again, this is national government. This isn't local government issue. And whilst I think that everything you're doing is all for the best for our residents, I don't think it's appropriate for national subjects to have huge amounts of time dedicated to it when we have enormous amounts of statutory obligations that we have to fulfil already. So I commend you for what you've done. I'm going to abstain from this, and I'm happy to support one, but I'm a little concerned about additional workloads on a council that's already got huge workloads on matters that are not relevant to the local council.
Thank you, Emily. Anybody else? Gavin, please.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly, item 1 is one that is an easy to do because it is contacting our MP. He's the legislator representing part of the borough. We should probably write to other MPs as well, extend it because there are 2 other MPs, 3 other MPs who cover the area, albeit East Hampshire only as a sliver, and ask them to get involved as well. Beyond that, the rest of it, I think all we can do is use our the partnerships that we have, the partnerships we're developing. I think as LGR progresses, then that's when it becomes really important, because the real action is about the fact that the police, through Donna Jones, actually talking to the health services in a polite and constructive way, are women out there who are going through what must be the most life-changing and devastating moment, being properly supported by all services and not being hounded by others. And I think that sort of approach is worth exploring to see how we do that. I think we'll probably be a stronger position when we have a greater wellbeing role as a unitary authority. But I don't think there's anything to stop that work going now. It's clearly work we can't control, but we can try and influence as best we can. And I think it's worthwhile doing so.
Anybody else?
Thank you, and I'd like to say thank you for everything you've done, and really appreciate the amount of work that you put into this. I support one, but I also think I also support the work in relation to the work that to talk to partners. I think it's something that we should look at. There's a big piece of work that we're doing now, starting to look at in relation to LGR, where we're going in relation to social care and all of the other areas that we would want to pick up. And I think it would be useful to have these conversations to understand what's going on. And I think in relation to meet with the British Pregnancy Advisory Service, and I don't know, John, whether you would be happy to pick up some of this in too. And I think it's good practice to find out really what is going on. So I understand that this is a lot of work, but I think it's just part of the process of partnership working really, and I think it's something that we can do. So I would welcome hearing from John what your thoughts are on that.
John.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
No, I'm absolutely happy to be put on the spot on this is an important subject. I also thank Stacey for bringing it to the council's attention. I'll be very happy to be involved in meetings with key partners to find out what's going on. I think at that stage, then we'll be in a better position to decide just what the role is in terms of the workload that we should ask officers to undertake. So at the moment, I'm sort of sitting in between Councillor Cubitt's position of being really worried about work right now, but I'm aware of the risk that this may be something that isn't, well, I wouldn't say inconstructive of the council, but is not a primary responsibility of the council. And I'll be clearer in my mind when I've met with somebody like BPAS to find out a bit more about what's going on. And I'll just finally say that I hope National Government responds in the way that Councillor Hart hopes they will on this issue. Thank you.
Andy.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'd like to also thank Stacey for bringing this forward today. I find myself agreeing with Onley very much on this. I think over the past couple of years, we've started to see more and more council motions touch perhaps primarily on national issues rather than local issues. And I'm as guilty as others in this. I've certainly raised motions before in the chamber which have a mix of national and local elements to them. And I think perhaps as an aside, I'd certainly be keen for us to perhaps note as a cabinet that maybe we do need to think about as a local authority as to the direction of future motions to make sure that they encompass actions that we as a local authority have primary responsibility for. We don't start straying too far away from our core remit and taking on the actions of central government or, as things currently stand, county council as well.
Thank you, Andy. Anybody else? Okay, in terms of taking this forward and bearing in mind the motion was passed, and for us to action as Cabinet in the debate that we've just had has been very constructive in that conversation. I think the first item in terms of writing to Luke as the MP and the Secretary of State is an action we can follow through on in the context of the debate that's currently taking place. So we'll get that context right in terms of whatever letter that we prepare and send. I think that's relevant as part of this. In terms of item 2, I think it is relevant that we do that partnership analysis, that work with partners to set down the position, the clarity and understanding that we can then build anything else out from. And so on that basis, I would suggest that the motion is actioned in 1, and I'm happy to undertake that action with Gavin. In 2, 3 and 4, we work through with John and myself, if you're happy to lead on that with the movers of the motion, such that we can begin at least to talk to partners, establish the position, and then review at that point. And we take it step by step in the context of where this council sits with its responsibilities, but also where we can work with others for their responsibilities to do better for our residents. And we can have that conversation. We do it in other areas as well, so this would not be the first or last time we do that. But I think that would be a logical, constructive way forward. So if we're agreed on that, Cabinet, that's the chosen course of action at this stage. And I'll work with John to lead. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you all.
I am going to take item 8 and move it up the agenda because I have a second public speaker this evening. So, Kate, you're up. Okay.
You mean 9?
Am I on now? Where am I?
8 is Newnham.
Oh, I apologise. Yes, I do. Thank you.
I didn't think that was council tax.
Sorry. So, sorry, I'm going off the speaker sheet AirPod. Don't worry. Don't worry. Don't worry. It's my fault for not paying attention. Item 9. It's motions referred from council. The rights of our rivers motion, chalk streams, and Kate was the mover of the motion. Kate, would you like to address Cabinet?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to address you today following the resounding support for the Rights of Rivers motion at the full council meeting on 15th of May, with near unanimous backing, one abstention, from our fellow councillors. This overwhelming endorsement reflects our shared commitment to safeguarding the borough's chalk streams and the natural environment, which are vital to our communities, economy and resilience. The importance of our rivers touches every ward in the borough, influencing water supply, sewerage and the health and well-being of our residents. Access to nature has been proved to enhance mental and physical health, while our rivers underpin biodiversity, natural capital services and economic vitality. They bolster flood resilience and support our ability to adapt to climate change, making their protection a priority for sustainable development. I'm hugely grateful to Councillor Konecki for his endorsement ensuring alignment with planning and infrastructure, Councillor Tomlin for his advocacy through the Climate and Ecological Emergency Portfolio, Councillors Morrow, Mackay and Laura James for their steadfast support in advancing this initiative, Councillor Gavin James, whose consideration of modest yet impactful funding we may yet need and will help drive this motion forward, Councillor Cubitt, my ward colleague, for her extensive research and comprehensive database, which have been instrumental in shaping this work. And finally, I express my deepest appreciation to our chair for providing thoughtful and wholehearted leadership, without which this motion would not have come to fruition. Moving forward, the Rights of Rivers motion is a clarion call for action. It underscores our duty to protect our natural environment, enhance community well-being and build a resilient future. I look forward to collaborating with Cabinet and officers to translate this commitment into tangible outcomes for our borough. Thank you for your continued support.
Thank you, Kate. I think technically that's what's called putting one on each of us on the spot, which is great. Love it. Chris, would you like to?
Thank you, Leader. I am grateful to all our fellow councillors for agreeing the motion that was proposed by Councillor Tuck and seconded, of course, by Councillor Conquest at our full council on the 15th of May on the rights of rivers. And as well, we had some support, welcome support, provided by Natural Basingstoke. So I'd like to thank them as well. So I'm sure that Cabinet colleagues will share my view that this is an extremely important subject for the Borough Council to be considering, and is in line with our ecological emergency and other policies in relation to the natural environment, particularly our recently adopted biodiversity strategy. Perhaps then we should liken this action to that of existing rules protecting preserved buildings and protected land. Why not the rivers? So I'm keen that we work through the list of actions and in the motion and engage with the community and key stakeholders to commence the drafting of this declaration with a view to seeking Cabinet's endorsement as soon as practically possible, but latest by spring of next year. This with the support of my Cabinet colleague, Councillor Andy Konecki, given his responsibility for planning and infrastructure matters, as well as Councillor Tuck, our Rivers champion, as proposer of this important piece of work, and indeed the seconder, Councillor Conquest. We all recognise that nationally and locally our watercourses are under pressure, and we need our collective action to support and improve them now and into the future. As a first step, my intention with your colleagues' endorsement is to establish an officer member working group to identify and work through the actions and to work with the community and stakeholders to draft this declaration. So I'm looking forward to engaging with them in the coming weeks and months to progress this work, and I will endeavour to keep Cabinet as well as the wider stakeholders advised of progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Andy.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Kate, for bringing forward this motion. I actually had the pleasure and honour a few years ago of promoting the original ecological emergency motion. So this chimes beautifully with that. I think it is an obvious next step. So the whole motion has my support. I also fully behind Chris's comments around the way forward on this in terms of practically making it happen, and this idea of an officer member working group. I think is very sensible, and hopefully will lead to this motion actually becoming a reality rather than just well-meaning words on a sheet of paper. I think the only other point I wanted to make was that it's been referenced here as the portfolio holder for strategic planning infrastructure. In the local plan work we've done to date over the past couple of years, we've always emphasised the important role of biodiversity, of rivers, of our waterways in general, and our natural environment. And I just sort of put it on the record that I will continue to do absolutely everything I can to make sure that our next local plan will be as tough as it can be within the allowed regulations to make sure that we do generally protect the wonderful natural environment that we've got, and that obviously does include our rivers and our waterways.
Thank you, Andy. Colleagues. Annalie?
I just want to say it's a fantastic motion. I really commend the extensive amount of work you and Councillor Conquest did on it. I'm delighted that the council approved it. I think it has a very important role, and I think that the residents in our borough expect nothing less of us than the essence of that motion. So I commend you and congratulate you for what you've achieved so far, but I agree it needs to be translated into tangible results. And there is a belief in the community that we as a council claim to be evidence-based, and the community expects that evidence to be legitimate evidence-based work and not fudge or sludge.
Yeah. Point taken. And it's reasoned if we think about the scale of development that the government are now asking us and requiring us to take. We cannot deliver those homes without the necessary infrastructure that goes with it, and that also involves water as well as all those other elements of infrastructure. So that's why this is critical. It's also important to bear in mind as well the backdrop to this. It was only this week there was an article in The Guardian regarding Thames Water, which is one of our major water companies. And that article referenced the fact that lenders are vying to take over Thames Water have demanded that that water company be given immunity from what it has done to our waterways, and that they not be prosecuted, thus neutering the Environment Agency's ability to hold them to account. Now, if that is the case, you think about 938 hours of dumping into the River Loddon last year, it just reinforces why this motion is even more important and recognises the fact of just how serious the issue is. So not only is the motion timely, the work is very important, and both Chris and Andy leading on this with yourself and others and officers and experts and members of the community to drive this forward. So I think this is absolutely where we need to be as an authority, leading on this and making our position very, very clear through the work that is set out in all of the bullet points that you will work through. So my suggestion, colleagues, is that we do that. We accept the motion. We work through them bullet point by bullet point. Chris leading with Andy, a working party established accordingly with colleagues, Kate and David to start with, but officers and also members of the public as experts and those in those trusts that have helped form the motion in the first place being part of that work. And that would be my suggestion, colleagues, on the way forward with you all, if that's what you are all happy with and think that's a good way forward. Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kate. So going back to the main agenda, item 7 is the motion referred from council, putting an end to empty shops, empowering our local economy. This motion has 4 bullet points to it, and at full council we made it very clear, a number of speakers, that we would entertain, thinking carefully about the implications of this. We need to think logically about whether or not this met the needs of our toolbox that we spoke about. So just in terms of considering it, would anybody like to make any contribution? Gavin, please. Full council.
Yeah, and just to reiterate the points made at full council, this new legislation came in December 2024. There were 3 authorities that were early adopters of the policy on that date and signed up to it. A further 8 authorities have signed up. To date, those 11 authorities between them have managed to bring no units back into use, but it is early days. So it may be a valuable tool, but there are clearly some pitfalls and concerns around funding, and also there could be an impact on our property services team and their ability to track every single property in the town to understand which ones have been empty for more than 12 months and then start the process. So essentially we do need to do some work. I will be asking officers to go away, produce a report that can come back to the relevant committee about exactly how this might fit in with the other work we're doing. Clearly, I think the work we're doing in terms of communicating with landlords, having conversations with them on a more informal basis is probably more effective than going down the legal route and potentially having problems. We're in a fortunate position that actually we generally do have a good relationship with local businesses and landlords, so we may not need to use it, but it's a harmless tool in the box potentially. So we'll have a look, we'll go away and have a look at it. We will plagiarise and pick all the reports that other councils have done and use that to save officer time, so we're not sort of inventing the wheel, and then we'll come back to the relevant committee at some point with what we've discovered and what we've found and how we might be able to make use of it.
Brilliant. Colleagues? I think it's important just to put it in some context, because this is important in terms of our town centre. So we have made a point of meeting regularly with the business community in the top of town. Councillor Cubitt, Councillor Laura James and Councillor Mackay have been working very closely with that community. We've responded to their needs in terms of our policy, so we're already rolling out a grant programme, and it will now be a second grant programme. So the first grant programme for shop fronts in the top of town was hugely successful, and we're now going to roll it out again, a second tranche of funding to support our top of town businesses. Our response to car parking in response to overnight parking was a response to their request to listen to their needs and what they needed from us, and Councillor Konechka took that through in the budget plan. In terms of the vacancies in the top of town, compared to other town centres, we are doing really well. In terms of footfall, just an example, Councillor Morrow, in terms of the events programme, 15,000 people coming through at the Let It Glow event. I mean, that top of town was absolutely packed, and again, just a reflection of how much work from our events team put in to the top of town. And then we take the fact that Festival Place has new investors that are very much aware of the need and their plans to bring in new retail, leisure and community use to the town centre, which is brilliant. I mean, to see that investment and bring forward new uses for Festival Place will be brilliant. But I do note as well that footfall in Festival Place is now back to pre-COVID levels, which is excellent. There are very few shopping centres in the country that can make that claim. So at the moment, the town centre is doing really, really well, and we should acknowledge that. And then in analysing this, it's the question, as Councillor James rightly says, is what more does this add to our toolbox? And I think that's the approach to take. So colleagues, I think this, if you agree, if you think this is fair, we could bump this to Resident Services Committee, invite the Resident Services Committee to look at this closely and carefully, and give us some recommendations, some support, take the time to investigate this. It's up for them to see how they deal with it, but we can ask the Chair of Resident Services whether they would be willing to take this motion and explore it in some depth, if we're comfortable with that, colleagues. Okay, let's ask the Chair of Resident Services if they're willing to take this item and work through it with their committee. So the final motion to consider this evening is item 8, motion refer from full council, Hampshire County Council to end funding for daycare service at Newman Court at the expense of some of our most vulnerable residents. Colleagues, would you like to say anything on this one? Andy?
Yes, thank you. I would like to say something as the ward councillor for Brighton Hill, where Newman Court operates. I've been a borough councillor for 6 years now, and in that time I've seen a number, dozens of painful Hampshire County Council cuts, and I'm sure we all have, but I've yet to come across one that is crueler than this. And it's because of the people it affects. As Paul just said, it affects some of our most vulnerable members of our community, people suffering with dementia and their families. They rely on Newman Court for treatment. They rely on it for respite care as well. I think we use the word vital life, the phrase vital lifeline as a bit of a cliche, and it is overused, but I think it is absolutely right to be used in this context. I met, along with fellow ward councillors, a number of families affected who use the centre on a regular basis, and the impact that this closure will have would genuinely be devastating. Hampshire County Council talk about the opportunity for people to use other centres, but it completely ignores how valuable the actual users of this and their families find Newman Court. So I was really pleased to see this motion come forward. I was really pleased to see that it had the support of the council, and I hope that we can do absolutely everything possible as a cabinet to dissuade Hampshire County Council and show them the error of their ways on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Anybody else on this one, Gavin?
Well, I need to say, and I'm sure you'll summarise the work we've done so far. Obviously, there's more work going on in the County Council to raise the issue. I think it's very obvious that this is short-termism at its extreme. Certainly, I was with Andy, we met lots of those families. There are people who are in their 80s that are suffering dementia, being looked after by people in their 80s, their partners, and they can do that because they have the respite, the care, the support, the camaraderie of the day services. And if those day services aren't there, they will not be able to continue to do what they do, and that burden will fall on Hampshire County Council and their social services team, and that point's got to be repeatedly reiterated to the County Council to make them hopefully see sense. So that campaign will continue to go right up until the decision day in July, doing what we can to make sure this important services gets operating within the borough.
Well said, agree. Only.
So I feel very strongly, and I don't know what we as a cabinet can do about this, is that firstly, absolutely agree with everything that Councillor Konecka and Councillor James have said, and the motion. Totally agree with everything. But we do know that Hampshire County Council's expenditure, 84% of it is spent on adult social care. And I therefore consider this to have a massive bearing on the government and the implications it's going to have on our local government reorganisation, because if the 84% spend of Hampshire County Council is flipped into the new unitaries, the new unitaries are going to be in the same economic state within a very short space of time. And I don't know whether we as a cabinet should be thinking about sending a letter to the government to say that this cannot continue. We cannot expect 84% of council tax to be spent on what I believe should be a national government spend. Council tax should go on roads and on things that are consumed locally. They should not be going on national health, and this is an extension, in my opinion, of the national health needs. So I don't know whether anybody wants to discuss that at all.
John.
I'd just like to add agreement to what Councillor Cubitt said, and the creation of a national care service in this country is long overdue. Thank you.
I think that's really fair. I think it's something we know colleagues at the LGA have been pushing as an agenda that the government need to hear. It's another example of where the infrastructure has to be there in order to meet the demands of our population. And I think it's really important that the County Council, we understand their position. Councillor Morrow and I were at a parish council meeting yesterday evening, and one of the county councillors who represents Basingstoke and Deane said, quote unquote, well, Hampshire doesn't have a financial problem. Now, I don't quite know where in the world he got that from, given the £216 million they were in debt last year and the projected £266 million in debt they're likely to be this year. He did happen to be the chair of their audit committee, which worried me slightly, to say the least. I think there's an important point to bear in mind here, which is if Hampshire are going to start making these cuts, and it's going to be like a spreadsheet where you literally go down the list, cut after cut after cut, and we've seen 2 in our boroughs so far, what they're doing to the CAB, which is disgraceful, and what they're now doing to Newman Court, which is disgraceful. This is the tip of the iceberg. And what we need to understand, I think, is it isn't a line on a spreadsheet. There are lives, and this is a human story behind this. Every single person that we sat in that public meeting in Brighton Hill listening to their stories behind this and how critical this respite care is to their needs is absolutely a reason why the county council should not be making a cut. If they make this cut, they will see their costs increase because the care that will be required for the residents who will be directly affected will outstrip this particular saving. They are not going to wind up making a saving. So what we really need to do, and Anneli and John are quite right, is in the future we need to genuinely think about how we manage, design services, create services, and how we link them to health, because there is a role for health in terms of discharge, in terms of how we work with people coming out of hospital or coming out of various care environments that might support these services. They might be aligned with these services that enable them then to be viable. There's a whole range of things that you could look at, and I know our officer team have questioned the county council to get the facts on this. So on the basis of what we can do, I think writing to government is definitely something we can do. We can add that we have written to the county council already, the county council, on the basis of the CAB and Newman Court. We have yet to have a reply from them. And we also raised a number of other points around their financial issues, for example, on Section 106 agreements and not fulfilling those at the moment, a whole range of issues. But we are also going to write again. Gavin and I are working on a letter that is in far more detail around the implications of this for our residents to the county council that will address what we think is a constructive way forward for the county council if they choose to listen. And be interesting to see what the response is. But we need to be very careful that we don't just see this as a list they go through. There are human lives that lie behind these decisions. Anneli, and then we'll move on.
Leader, I think you make some outstanding points there, and I think it's important also to remember who Hampshire County Council serves. And of course, we are the largest population as a borough of any of their other boroughs. And I think I'm right in saying that we have the most vulnerable and the largest percentage of the most deprived within their population, because all of the rest of their population is in more wealthy areas. So I just think it's despicable. I think it needs to be resolved, but it also demonstrates that Hampshire's making decisions that impact the most vulnerable, the most deprived in their entire portfolio and their population, and it's not a great look.
It certainly isn't. So, colleagues, we have here the motion in front of us. The suggestion is that we make our views very, very clear. If you're comfortable with that, we will draft letters to government. We will draft further communications to the county council beyond that which we've already done. And we will express our deep concern at the removal of funding from Newman House and request a reversal of this, as it is a flawed decision. Are we comfortable with that? Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
Oh, the proposal, they haven't got there yet. We want them to not make the decision. That's a good point. Thank you. A flawed proposal. Okay, colleagues, that deals with all of the motions we've got on the agenda. And we've got the two reports this evening. The first one is item 10, which is the Future Economic Framework. And I'm really pleased to be able to bring this to Cabinet this evening. This is our future economic strategy that officers have spent a huge amount of time working to bring forward. It's been great working with the business community and our local economic partners in order to present the strategy before you this evening. It is a very clear approach, identifying some very clear priorities. The three core areas that we're talking about are about making our local economy inclusive, clean, and smart. And just look at what we've managed to achieve. So our local economy at the moment is running on about £8.5 billion GVA, gross value added. That is hugely significant to the South East and to this country. We have over 7,000 local businesses. We have significant full employment. We have a very rich skills and employment agenda with both of our amazing colleges. We have an ambition and a desire to bring a university to Basingstoke. And that position that we're developing, that whole strength that we're developing, is to grow our economy in a way that ensures prosperity for all, that every part of our community benefits from that. We have a very broad economy. It's one of the reasons why we were able to survive the pandemic in a way we did. because we actually have a broad economic base, including a significant manufacturing base. But also what we've seen in the past year is the level of work we're putting into inward investment. Not only grade A office space opening at plant, absolutely amazing office facilities that are opening, but companies like Blatchford, who have committed their future to Basingstoke by investing and proposing to invest over 15 million in their factory and office. So investment after investment coming forward, securing the future of the AA. One of the very first things we did as a new administration was to keep the AA in Basingstoke and secure their future, working with them. So we have a really good and strong record already of delivering economic growth positively for our residents. And the whole point of this strategy is to set that out as to what we can do, working with our partners, because we can't do it alone, to really drive forward that idea of prosperity for all. And I really do commend the report before to you this evening and welcome any comments you may have. Gavin.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Very timely report. Is talking about our economic future for all our viewer out there. This time next year, we will have a mayor, and that's not a mayor that opens fates. That's a mayor that represents the whole of Hampshire with government and is supposed to support the economic growth, unlock funding for capital expenditure, to support infrastructure, to support this very agenda. So I'd encourage anyone who's thinking of standing to be our Metro Mayor, read this, understand it, feel free to ask questions, because this is your workload if you are successfully elected, because the new mayor has a responsibility to help us deliver this strategy and bring it to life. The new mayoral role is not about someone swanning around handing out lanyards. It's someone who's got to actually get down dirty and get this stuff done. And I think it's great that a year before those elections, we already have a clear agenda, a clear strategy that sets out exactly what their workload's going to be for the successfully elected person.
Thank you, Gavin. Anybody else? Andy, Laura, and then Ollie.
I'm just a very, very impressive piece of work. I think you said at the start, Paul, that a lot of work has gone into that, and I think that's very clear from reading it. It's also a very strong reflection of the relationship that we have with the business community, which doesn't just happen. It's the result of years of hard work and investment to get it to that stage. I've seen a lot of strategy documents which are quite warm and fluffy and perhaps tend to focus on objectives and themes, and I've probably written a few strategy documents that fall into that trap. So I think what particularly impresses me about this is the actual action plans. If you look at sort of from page 49 onwards in the pack, you'll see it's got a clear way forward, lots of specific targets and actions that need to be undertaken over the next few years to deliver this. So it has my wholehearted support, and I'd like to thank everybody involved in producing this, because it's a really, really good piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Laura.
I'd just like to echo Andy's comments. I think this is a really impressive piece of work. And like he says, I don't get the feeling that this is a document that's going to sit on the shelf. And, and I think that's really important, that we don't want that as an administration. I know that an enormous amount of work has gone into this, and it reflects, but I think for me, it's an easy to read document. I think the subject matter could have been very different, but it's not. It reads well, and it's very clear on what our direction of travel is. So thank you very much for all of the work that's gone into it, and I think this is an excellent piece of work.
Thank you very much. Ollie.
Yes, leader. So having worked with you for 2 years and witnessed your dialogue with businesses on regular occasion with officers, we could not, and you could not, and the officers could not have been clearer to the businesses that we were here to help support them. And I think this is a great next step. I would, however, like to say that the reality is that the growth makers in our country, the businesses, operate despite government, not with government. Government it creates barriers to all our businesses, and so it's fantastic that we see that our role is to help facilitate our businesses, because we know how important the economy is to our residents. But I think we also need to be open to the fact that we're not the wealth creators. The wealth creators are the businesses, and that anything and everything that they ask us to do to try and help enable them to be more successful has to be essential. And I do think one area which is a drag is the planning department. Time and time again, businesses say that the hurdles that the planning department creates is an issue. So whilst I think this is wonderful and commendable, we're not the wealth creators. It's wonderful that we're there to support, but we need to think about those departments that cause impediments to businesses being more successful.
I think that point about the entrepreneurial talent is really important to emphasise here, colleagues. All of the businesses that we've met are driven by really amazing people.
Yeah.
And I just think that your point about that unlocking of entrepreneurial talent in our borough is worth emphasising. So in terms of the strategy before us, we have a very clear action plan, colleagues, and I go through that on pages 49 onwards throughout the main report, setting out very clearly action after action after action in each of the core areas of the strategy. So colleagues, bearing in mind that that is the core of what we're voting on this evening, that the actions from this strategy are then delivered by our amazing teams across the council, all of our officer teams across the council. I welcome the report to you, recommend the report to you, and invite you to support it. Are we all agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. The final item, main item on the agenda this evening is item 11, which is key performance indicators 25, 26, amendments and priority trackers. If we go to the report on page 59, we have the KPIs set out for us. Does anybody have any comments on them?
Sorry, I will continue my record of speaking to every single point on today's agenda item, which I promise not to repeat again in the future. I just wanted to draw people's attention to KPI 3.40 at the bottom of page 67 regarding, 3.39, apologies, regarding the provision of EV chargers in the borough. This is something that came out of our EV strategy. So you might remember we launched the Borough Council's first ever EV strategy right at the end of last year, and there was a public consultation around that as well. And one of the bits of feedback we had was we need to be more ambitious, we need to set tougher targets. So we went away and we thought about it, and this is the result. So we've set ourselves, now that we have an EV charger in every ward in our borough, which was our initial objective for the previous financial year, we're now setting that a step higher, and this is the target that's emerged from that. So I just wanted to give that as an example of this Borough Council listening to residents and trying to be as tough as it can be in terms of setting targets, particularly environmental targets that will benefit our borough.
Thank you, Andy. A number of the KPIs have changed as a result of our conversations with the Resources Committee and the recommendations and thoughts they gave us. We've sat down and gone through this in some detail. Our officers have recommended, where appropriate, that KPIs be changed, and they're all reflected in here as well. So this is the final document that really reflects all of that hard work that's gone on to get us to here. And I want to thank the team for pulling it all together. And I know Katie and the team have put an awful lot of effort into this, so I'm grateful. Colleagues, we have this before us. Are you happy to approve the paper as presented? Agreed. Thank you very much. There are no other items on the agenda this evening, and I close the meeting. Thank you.
Fantastic.